Weirdest details found in celebrity wills after death, golden era stars. We all think we know Hollywood's golden age stars, their glamorous lives, their scandalous affairs, their rise to fame. But there's one final chapter of their stories that remained hidden until after their deaths. I've uncovered the strangest, most shocking details from celebrity wills that reveal who these icons truly were when the cameras stopped rolling. From bizarre revenge clauses to secret fortunes, these aren't just legal documents, they're final confessions. And number 12, that revelation was so disturbing the family tried to seal the will forever. But first, what makes someone at the height of fame and fortune make such unusual final demands? Is it ego, hidden trauma, or something far more calculated that reveals the real person behind the carefully crafted Hollywood image? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see these legendary stars in a completely new light through the private instructions they never expected the public to read. Number 1. Humphrey Bogart, the chess master's final move. When tough guy Humphrey Bogart died in 1957, his will contained a stipulation that surprised even his closest friends. The star of Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon left instructions that his $10,000 custom-made chess set, worth about $100,000 today, be given to the first person who could solve a particular chess problem he'd created. Bogart had been an accomplished chess player, nearly master level, often playing between takes on set. But the chess problem he designed was so complex that it took nearly 5 years before anyone could solve it. The eventual winner, a 12-year-old boy from San Francisco named Raymond Fisher, who would later become a chess grandmaster. What makes this bequest particularly fascinating is that Bogart included a handwritten note with the chess set. To whoever solves this puzzle, you understand me better than most who knew me in life. Lauren Bacall, his widow, later revealed that the chess problem was actually a metaphor for Bogart's own life, the pieces representing key figures and the solution mirroring how he wished he had navigated his own journey. The most poignant detail? The winning move in Bogart's chess problem required sacrificing the queen to save the king, perhaps a reference to how Bacall had sacrificed her youth and initial career trajectory to care for Bogart during his final battle with esophageal cancer. Bogart's will demonstrated what his close friends always knew. Beneath the tough guy exterior was a strategic mind, always thinking several moves ahead, even when planning for his own death. Number 2. Jean Harlow, the mother's control. When Jean Harlow died suddenly at just 26 in 1937, the contents of her will shocked Hollywood. The blonde bombshell, who seemed to embody sexual freedom, had created a document that revealed the troubling reality of her life. Harlow's will left her entire estate, approximately $900,000, about $18 million today, to her mother, Jean Bello, with not a penny going to her fiancé William Powell or her beloved stepfather Marino Bello. But it was a specific clause about her personal possessions that raised eyebrows. Harlow explicitly stated that all her diaries, personal letters, and private photographs were to be destroyed immediately, not merely kept private, but completely eradicated. Her mother carried out this wish with disturbing efficiency, burning everything within 24 hours of the will being read. What makes this request particularly suspicious is that Harlow had been trying to distance herself from her controlling mother in the months before her death. Friends reported that Harlow had confided she was rewriting her will, intending to leave her mother only a small portion of her estate. The timing becomes even more disturbing when you consider that Harlow died of kidney failure that some medical historians believe was exacerbated by the toxic hair treatments her mother insisted she continue. Some Hollywood insiders have suggested that the will's instructions to destroy all personal papers might have concealed evidence of this toxic relationship. The most telling detail came from Powell himself, who later told a close friend. Jean's final wishes didn't sound like Jean at all. They sounded like her mother. This single clause in Harlow's will casts a dark shadow over her seemingly glamorous life, suggesting that Hollywood's original bombshell may never have had true autonomy, even in death. Number 3. I leave 10% to whoever deals the first hand of baccarat after my death. Errol Flynn's last gamble. To the house dealer at the Riviera Casino in Havana, Cuba, who deals the first hand of baccarat after the news of my death reaches the casino, I leave 10% of my remaining estate. These words from Errol Flynn's will set off an international diplomatic incident when the swashbuckling star died in 1959. Once worth millions from films like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood, Flynn had squandered most of his fortune on women, boats, and his legendary drinking. The 10% amounted to roughly $10,000, about $100,000 today. Not a fortune, but enough to change someone's life in pre-revolutionary Cuba. There was just one problem. Flynn died just months after Fidel Castro had seized power, throwing the Cuban casino industry into chaos. When his executors attempted to fulfill this unusual bequest, they discovered the Riviera Casino had been nationalized. The search for the mystery dealer became an international news story. American newspapers speculated it was a final publicity stunt from a fading star. Cuban state media suggested it was Flynn's way of supporting the revolution. The truth was far simpler, as Flynn's friend David Niven later revealed. After winning a small fortune at Baccarat one night, Errol told me the dealer had been kinder to him than most people in Hollywood, Niven recalled. He said that was the only honest money he'd ever made, and someday he'd return the favor. The mystery dealer was eventually identified as 53-year-old Pedro Justiz, who ironically had been a secret Castro supporter. The money was delivered through diplomatic channels, making Justiz one of the few casino workers to receive an American inheritance during the early Castro years. Flynn couldn't have known his final gesture would bridge Cold War politics, but as Justiz later told a Cuban newspaper, even in death, Flynn found a way to create an adventure. Number 4. Carole Lombard, The Premonition. When screwball comedy queen Carole Lombard died in a 1942 plane crash at age 33, her will revealed something so eerie that it stunned even her husband, Clark Gable. Just 3 weeks before her fatal accident, Lombard had completely revised her will, adding detailed instructions about her burial and the distribution of her personal effects that seemed to anticipate her sudden death. Lombard's updated will specified that should she die in an accident, Gable was to receive her collection of 72 unpublished poems she had written throughout their marriage, poems he didn't even know existed. Each was dated with instructions that he should read one per month for the next 6 years, essentially allowing her to communicate with him long after her death. What makes this particularly chilling is that Lombard had a lifelong interest in spiritualism and had consulted a psychic just before her fatal trip, who reportedly warned her not to travel by air. Lombard ignored the warning to return more quickly to Gable. The most haunting detail emerged in the final poem, dated exactly 6 years after all the others, which Gable read in 1948. In it, Lombard referenced moving on and gave Gable her blessing to find happiness with someone new. Within months of reading this final message, the previously inconsolable Gable began dating seriously for the first time since Lombard's death. Gable kept these poems private throughout his life, but in his own will, he requested that they be burned upon his death, ensuring that Lombard's final words to him would remain their secret. His widow, Kay Gable, honored this request, burning the poems without reading them. Was Lombard's revised will truly a premonition, or simply prudent planning by a woman about to travel during wartime? Either way, her final act of love continued to comfort Gable for years after her death. Number 5. The children W.C. Fields actually loved. In 1954, a small brass plaque appeared in the common room of St. Martin's Home for Children in Philadelphia. It read, "Children aren't all bad if you bathe them regularly and keep them fed." The quote was from W.C. Fields, the misanthropic comedian whose trademark was his theatrical hatred of children. Few knew that the plaque represented the final chapter in an 8-year legal battle over Fields' will. When he died on Christmas Day 1946, a final joke from the comedian who claimed to hate Christmas, his $750,000 estate contained a bombshell. Fields had directed the majority of his fortune toward establishing the W.C. Fields College for orphaned white boys and girls. This baffling bequest came from a man who built his entire career on despising children. Even more surprising was a codicil added just months before his death that removed the word white and explicitly stated the college should admit children regardless of race, color, or religion, remarkably progressive for 1946. Fields went into meticulous detail about the proposed school. All students were to receive professional instruction in juggling and poker, with Fields explaining, "No child equipped with these skills will ever need to go hungry." The curriculum also required teaching practical jokes, which Fields considered essential survival tools for orphans who must make their way in a hostile world. The college was never built. Fields' estranged wife Hattie and longtime girlfriend Carlotta Monti spent years fighting over the estate. By the time the courts resolved the matter, the money had dwindled to less than a third of its original value. Instead, the remaining funds were divided among several existing orphanages, each required to display the now famous plaque. The quote perfectly encapsulated the contradiction of Fields. a man who publicly proclaimed his hatred for children while privately ensuring his fortune would benefit them. As his friend Gene Fowler later observed, Bill Fields created his misanthropic character to hide a heart too tender for this world. His will was the only time he let the mask slip. Number 6. The Secret Library of Marilyn Monroe. The 430 books were discovered in a storage unit in 2010, nearly 5 decades after Marilyn Monroe's death. Each volume contained the same custom bookplate, from the Library of Marilyn Monroe, who believed that learning and imagination can take you anywhere. These weren't celebrity biographies or fashion magazines. They were works by Dostoevsky, Proust, Joyce, and complete collections of major philosophers, many heavily annotated in Monroe's distinctive handwriting. Alongside them was a carefully organized reading curriculum more rigorous than many college programs. This discovery finally explained one of the most puzzling provisions in Monroe's 1962 will. The star of Some Like It Hot and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes had specified that her personal library was to be distributed to children's hospitals and schools in the foster system, institutions she knew intimately from her own orphaned childhood. But the executors of her estate, unsure what to do with books that contradicted Monroe's dumb blonde public image, placed them in storage instead. When the storage bills stopped being paid in the 2000s, the contents were auctioned, finally bringing Monroe's intellectual life to light. The books revealed a woman systematically educating herself in literature, philosophy, politics, and psychology, all while maintaining the marketable image of a beautiful but vapid sex symbol. Her annotations showed not just comprehension, but sophisticated critical thinking, with one literature professor noting that her margin notes on Joyce's Ulysses displayed graduate-level analysis. The most heartbreaking aspect was the contrast between Monroe's intellectual aspirations and her public persona. While she was reading Freud's complete works and teaching herself Italian to read Dante in the original language, studio publicists were crafting stories about her childlike simplicity. As her acting coach, Lee Strasberg, who received 75% of her intellectual property rights, later remarked, "The Marilyn the world knew was a character she played. The real woman was the most intellectually curious person I ever taught." Number 7. Rudolph Valentino, The Mysterious Ring. When Rudolph Valentino, Hollywood's first great sex symbol, died suddenly in 1926 at just 31, his will contained a directive so strange it spawned conspiracy theories that persist to this day. Valentino left the majority of his estate to his family and charitable causes, but included one peculiar instruction. His platinum and sapphire ring was to be delivered to a woman identified only as SP at a post office box in Madrid, Spain. The executor was forbidden from attempting to discover the woman's identity and was instructed to include a note containing just 3 words, Ti amo ancora, I still love you, in Italian. This mysterious bequest captured public imagination, with newspapers offering rewards to anyone who could identify the enigmatic SP. Various women claimed to be Valentino's secret love, but none could produce evidence supporting their claims. What makes this story particularly fascinating is that Valentino had been wearing this specific ring in every film since 1922, causing fans to develop elaborate theories about its significance. Some believed it was a token from a secret marriage, others suggested it was connected to the Italian royal family. The truth remained hidden until 1975, when a 91-year-old Spanish woman named Soledad Padilla revealed herself as the recipient. She produced the ring and Valentino's note, along with letters establishing that she had been Valentino's first love when he was a struggling dancer in New York before his film career. They had planned to marry, but her devout Catholic family forbade the union. The most poignant detail? Padilla had never worn the ring, keeping it in its original box for nearly 50 years. When asked why, she explained, "It was not mine to wear. It was his promise of a life we never had." Valentino's final act was to close a chapter of his life that had remained entirely hidden from public view, revealing that Hollywood's greatest lover had remained devoted to his first love long after fame and multiple marriages. Number 8. My films belong to me, not the studios. Mae West's fortune-making will. A museum curator in Los Angeles holds up a diamond ring. "This is the famous Mae West diamond," she explains to visitors. "But it's not real. The real one was sold decades ago to fund a women's shelter." The fake diamond represents one of Hollywood's greatest posthumous pranks. When West died in 1980 at age 87, her will instructed that her iconic jewelry be buried with her, but only after being replaced with high-quality replicas. The genuine articles, worth millions, were to be sold to support causes she had secretly championed throughout her life. This clever substitution perfectly captured the essence of a woman who had built a career on subversive double entendres, but it was just one small detail in a will that revealed West as one of Hollywood's greatest business minds. While most stars of her era died with modest estates, West left behind $20 million, about $70 million today, an extraordinary sum for an actress whose major films had ended in the 1940s. Her will revealed how she'd built this fortune. Unlike her contemporaries, West had negotiated ownership percentages of her films rather than accepting straight salaries. "I told the studio boys that I'd rather own a piece of the pie than just get paid to bake it," West wrote in notes attached to her will. "They laughed at the dumb blonde act right up until they realized I owned the copyright to their biggest moneymakers." West structured her bequests with the same strategic thinking that had defined her career. Rather than leaving lump sums, she created a series of timed disbursements with specific conditions attached to each payment. Her great-niece received payments that increased if she completed college and remained unmarried until 30, reflecting West's belief that a woman should establish herself before she establishes a husband. As her attorney later noted, people thought May's famous line was, "Come up and see me sometime." In reality, her most important words were, "I want points on the gross, not the net," a lesson every Hollywood actor should learn. Number 9. Charlie Chaplin, the disinherited son. When Charlie Chaplin died in 1977 at age 88, his will revealed the painful family drama that had shadowed his later years. The silent film pioneer left an estate valued at $25 million, about $115 million today, dividing it among his wife Una and his 8 youngest children. But one name was conspicuously absent: his oldest son, Charles Chaplin Jr. The will contained a single devastating sentence regarding his firstborn: "I have intentionally and with full knowledge omitted to provide for my son, Charles Chaplin Jr., who has been a constant source of unhappiness to me." This public rejection was the final chapter in a troubled relationship. Charles Jr. was born in 1925 to Chaplin's second wife, Lita Gray, during a scandalous divorce that became tabloid fodder. The divorce settlement was then the largest in American history, and young Charles became a symbol of his father's public humiliation. What makes this disinheritance particularly tragic is what emerged after both men had died. Charles Jr. passed away just months after his father, and among his possessions was found a scrapbook containing every newspaper mention of his father's career, meticulously maintained from childhood into his 50s. Despite the rejection, he had privately remained his father's most devoted fan. The most revealing document surfaced in 2010 when researchers discovered a draft of an earlier will in which Chaplin had actually left Charles Jr. a significant bequest, along with a letter of reconciliation. This version was dated just weeks before a series of strokes diminished Chaplin's mental capacity. His final will was signed several months later, raising questions about whether it truly reflected his wishes or was influenced by others in his household. Chaplin's will represents one of Hollywood's saddest father-son stories, a relationship broken beyond repair, with millions of dollars ultimately proving less valuable than the forgiveness neither man could offer during their lifetimes. Number 10. She Shall Never Rest Beside Me, Bette Davis's Burial Ban. When screen legend Bette Davis died in 1989, her will contained a bombshell that reignited one of Hollywood's most notorious family feuds. The star of All About Eve and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane left a $1 million estate with a single sentence that made international headlines: "I have intentionally and with full knowledge omitted to provide for my daughter Margot and her issue." The public disinheritance was the final salvo in a war that had begun in 1987 when Margot, born B.D. Hyman, published My Mother's Keeper, a scathing memoir portraying Davis as an abusive alcoholic. Davis, devastated by what she considered the ultimate betrayal, never spoke to her daughter again. What made this will particularly powerful wasn't just who Davis excluded, but who she included. She left substantial bequests to her adopted son, Michael Merrill, and to Catherine Cermak, her personal assistant of 7 years, essentially declaring that loyalty mattered more to her than blood. The most revealing aspect of Davis's will was a codicil added just weeks before her death. It directed that her tombstone should read, "She did it the hard way," and specified that the cemetery plot adjacent to hers should remain permanently empty, ensuring that Margot could not be buried beside her even in death. Davis's friend Olivia de Havilland later revealed that Davis had considered an even harsher response, legally disowning Margot and attempting to have her surname legally changed back to Sherry, Margot's birth father's name. She abandoned this plan only when lawyers advised it would be unlikely to succeed. In a final twist that Davis couldn't have anticipated, her disinheritance actually benefited Margot financially. The publicity surrounding the will drove sales of My Mother's Keeper, ultimately earning Margot far more than her inheritance would have been. Davis's will demonstrated that the formidable determination she displayed on screen was equally powerful in her personal life. She was willing to maintain a grudge literally to her grave and beyond. Number 11. The roses that appeared for 20 years on Marilyn's grave. Cemetery workers at Westwood Village Memorial Park noticed it first. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, fresh roses would appear at Marilyn Monroe's crypt. Not random flowers from various fans, identical long-stemmed red roses, always precisely 3, always from the same florist. This mysterious tribute continued without fail for 20 years after Monroe's death in 1962. The cemetery staff eventually traced them to a standing order at a local flower shop, paid for in advance by Joe DiMaggio, Monroe's second husband. What made this gesture remarkable wasn't just its longevity, but that DiMaggio and Monroe had been divorced for 8 years before her death, and their marriage had lasted less than a year. Yet when she died from a barbiturate overdose at 36, it was DiMaggio who arranged her funeral, barring many Hollywood figures from attending the service. DiMaggio's will, opened after his death in 1999, finally explained the roses. It contained a provision establishing a trust to continue the flower deliveries in perpetuity, along with a letter explaining their significance. The roses are not for Marilyn the star, he wrote, but for Norma Jean, the girl I failed to protect. The letter revealed that despite their divorce, DiMaggio had continued to care deeply for Monroe, attempting several times to rescue her from what he saw as Hollywood's destructive influence. He never forgave himself for not being able to save her from her demons. The most poignant detail emerged in DiMaggio's own burial arrangements. Though he had remarried briefly after Monroe, his final wish was for a small photograph of her to be placed in his casket. His last recorded words were reportedly, "I'll finally get to see Marilyn again." The trust established in DiMaggio's will would have continued the rose deliveries indefinitely, but the provision proved legally unenforceable after his estate was settled. The roses stopped in 1983 when DiMaggio's advance payment was exhausted, but for 2 decades, they had served as a silent testimony to a love that had outlived both its subjects. Number 12. Joan Crawford, The Calculated Cruelty. When Joan Crawford died in 1977, her will contained perhaps the most famous and certainly the cruelest disinheritance clause in Hollywood history. It is my intention to make no provision herein for my son Christopher or my daughter Christina for reasons which are well known to them. This public rejection of her 2 eldest adopted children made front-page news, but it was only the beginning of the story. The will itself was a masterpiece of calculated image management, structured to present Crawford as both generous and nurturing to everyone except the 2 children who had allegedly wronged her. What makes this will particularly revealing is how meticulously it was crafted to shape Crawford's posthumous reputation. Every bequest to charity included specific language about Crawford's commitment to children's welfare and lifelong dedication to helping the less fortunate. These clauses read more like press releases than legal directives, suggesting Crawford anticipated how the document would be reported after her death. The most chilling aspect of Crawford's will emerged only in 1978 when Christina published Mommy Dearest, alleging years of physical and emotional abuse. Suddenly, the will's phrasing seemed less like a mother's righteous anger and more like a preemptive strike against accusations Crawford knew would eventually surface. Crawford's lawyer later confirmed that she had revised her will multiple times in her final years, each time making the language about Christina and Christopher increasingly harsh. The final version was rewritten just months before her death, after Crawford allegedly learned that Christina was working on a memoir. Perhaps the most revealing detail is what Crawford left to her youngest daughters, Kathy and Cindy. Each received approximately $77,500, modest amounts from a woman once worth millions. Crawford had spent lavishly in her final years, effectively ensuring that no child would receive a substantial inheritance, while simultaneously positioning her disinheritance of Christina and Christopher as exceptional punishment rather than financial financial necessity. Crawford's will represents her final performance, a document crafted with the same attention to public perception that characterized her entire career. Even in death, she remained determined to control the narrative, a goal that ultimately failed when Mommy Dearest became a bestseller and later a cult classic film. Number 13. The Secret Poems of Hollywood's Most American Hero. I am sending you this typed copy of the enclosed handwritten verses. Jimmy left them scattered throughout his papers, never showing them to anyone, not even me. I believe they deserve to be shared. This simple note, signed by Gloria Stewart and attached to a collection of poems, solved a mystery that had puzzled Hollywood since Jimmy Stewart's will was read in 1997. The beloved star of It's a Wonderful Life had left instructions that 300 poems he had written throughout his life be published posthumously, with all proceeds going to charity. The revelation stunned those who knew Stewart. The lanky actor with the famous stammering delivery had crafted a public persona as the quintessential unpoetic American everyman. Yet in private, he had been composing sophisticated verses that revealed a depth and sensitivity entirely contrary to his public image. Stewart had written these poems in hotel rooms, on film sets, and during his service as a bomber pilot in World War II. Some were light and humorous, others profoundly moving reflections on mortality and courage. The most remarkable, On the Death of a Beloved Dog, written after the passing of his golden retriever Bo, revealed a man of extraordinary emotional depth, concealed beneath his characteristic on-screen simplicity. Stewart's will specified that the poems should be published under the pseudonym Alexander Woollcott, the name of a literary critic who had encouraged Stewart's acting career in the 1930s. This detail suggests that Stewart had considered publication during his lifetime, but couldn't bring himself to reveal this vulnerable side to a public that had typecast him as the straightforward, unpoetic American hero. Gloria Stewart honored her husband's wishes, and Jimmy Stewart's Poems was published in 2008, revealing to the world a man far more complex than the character he had played both on and off screen for over 60 years. As his friend Henry Fonda remarked after reading the collection, Jimmy showed the world exactly what he wanted them to see. The real man was in those poems all along. Number 14. Why Katharine Hepburn refused to let her family keep her Oscars. The 4 Academy Award statuettes were among the most coveted items in Katharine Hepburn's estate when she died in 2003. Museum curators, collectors, and family members all hoped to acquire these symbols of her unprecedented success. But Hepburn's will contained a provision that shocked them all. Before any item of value could be inherited or sold, it had to be offered first to the Smithsonian Institution, then to at least 3 film preservation organizations. This unusual stipulation wasn't about vanity or ensuring her memorabilia would be publicly displayed. It was part of a carefully crafted estate plan that revealed the same independent thinking that had defined Hepburn's groundbreaking Hollywood career. Rather than making outright requests to her family or favorite causes, Hepburn created a complex system of charitable remainder trusts. This arrangement allowed her to provide income to family members for their lifetimes while ensuring the principal would ultimately benefit her chosen charities, primarily focused on women's education and reproductive rights. What makes this approach particularly revealing is how it aligned with Hepburn's lifelong values. The woman who once said, "I have not lived as a woman, I have lived as a man," structured her $20 million estate to maximize its impact on causes that expanded women's autonomy and opportunity, even if it meant reducing the immediate financial benefit to her heirs. The most telling aspect of Hepburn's will concerned her extensive real estate holdings. She owned valuable properties in Connecticut and New York, but rather than simply leaving them to heirs or charities, she established conservation easements on each property, permanently restricting development. These easements reduced the property's monetary value, but preserved the natural landscapes Hepburn had cherished throughout her life. As her attorney noted, Miss Hepburn approached estate planning exactly as she approached her career. She was determined to do it differently than anyone else and to make choices based on principle rather than convention. Number 15. I built my fortune by negotiating like I act. Cary Grant's Business Secrets. I came to Hollywood with nothing and learned how to build wealth through observation and experimentation. Perhaps my experiences can help others do the same without the early failures I endured. This sentence from a letter attached to Cary Grant's will explains one of its most unusual provisions. When Grant died in 1986, he directed that his extensive archives of business records, investment strategies, and financial decisions be donated to the University of Southern California's Business School for use in their curriculum. Grant's estate was valued at approximately $60 million, about $160 million today, an enormous sum for an actor who had effectively retired in the mid-1960s. His will detailed the source of this wealth. Not acting, but a series of astute investments and business decisions that had multiplied his earnings many times over. Unlike most stars who entrusted their money to agents and managers, Grant had personally negotiated ownership stakes in his films beginning in the 1940s, decades before this became common practice. He had also been an early investor in companies like Fabergé and MGM Grand Hotels and had purchased significant California real estate long before property values soared. The most revealing clause in Grant's will concerned the education of his only child, Jennifer. Rather than simply providing her with wealth, he established a trust that would match dollar for dollar any money she earned on her own until age 35. Jennifer would receive her substantial inheritance only after completing both college and business school, requirements that ensured she would understand how to manage the wealth she would eventually receive. This carefully structured inheritance revealed the true Cary Grant. While audiences knew him as the debonair star of North by Northwest and To Catch a Thief, his financial records showed a self-taught business genius who had carefully crafted a sophisticated public persona that concealed the shrewd mind behind the charming smile. Number 16. Return All My Letters, Greta Garbo's final disappearing act. The form letters began arriving in 1990, shortly after Greta Garbo's death at age 84. Each contained the same brief message: Miss Garbo would have wished you to have this back, accompanied by the original letter the recipient had sent to Garbo sometimes decades earlier. This extraordinary gesture was dictated by Garbo's will, which contained some of the most unusual privacy provisions ever seen in a celebrity estate. The legendary star, who had walked away from Hollywood at the height of her fame in 1941, had specified that all correspondence she had received throughout her life be returned to the original senders or their families. What makes this directive particularly poignant is that Garbo had meticulously organized and preserved these letters for decades, suggesting they held great importance to her despite her famous reclusiveness. Yet her final act was to erase this written record of her connections, as if attempting to disappear completely. Garbo's will revealed an obsession with privacy that extended far beyond her lifetime. She explicitly forbade any biographical films, plays, or books about her life, threatening to withhold substantial charitable bequests if her heirs allowed such projects to move forward. Though legally unenforceable, this restriction demonstrated her determination to maintain control over her image even after death. Perhaps the most revealing clause concerned Garbo's extensive art collection, valued at over $10 million. Rather than donating the pieces to museums or leaving them to loved ones, she directed that all artworks be sold to private collectors outside the United States, specifically requiring that each sale include a confidentiality agreement, preventing the new owners from revealing they had purchased pieces from her collection. As her niece Gray Reesfield later observed, "My aunt didn't just want privacy in life. She wanted to vanish entirely after death, leaving as little trace as possible that she had ever existed at all." Number 17, Gary Cooper, The Secret Faith. When Gary Cooper died in 1961, his will contained a revelation that stunned Hollywood. The star of High Noon and Sergeant York, known for his stoic screen persona and famous for playing quintessentially American heroes, had secretly converted to Catholicism in his final months. Cooper's will directed that half his estate, valued at approximately $6 million, about $58 million today, be placed in a trust to support Catholic education and missionary work. This request was especially surprising given Cooper's lifelong identification with his Protestant upbringing and his reputation as one of Hollywood's most famous womanizers. What makes this revelation particularly powerful is that Cooper had kept his conversion entirely private, sharing it only with his wife and daughter. He had continued to maintain his public image while privately embracing a faith that would have surprised his fans and colleagues alike. The most touching detail emerged in a letter attached to Cooper's will, addressed to his only daughter Maria. In it, he explained that his conversion had come after years of spiritual searching and was not a deathbed decision made from fear. "I have found peace where I least expected it," he wrote, "and I want this peace to be my final legacy to you, more valuable than any material inheritance." Cooper's will also directed that a portion of his fortune be used to establish a scholarship fund for the children of stuntmen, many of whom had doubled for him throughout his career. This bequest acknowledged the physical risks others had taken to help build his heroic screen persona, a debt he felt compelled to repay. In a final gesture that reflected both his new faith and his awareness of his own failings, Cooper's will included formal apologies to several women with whom he had conducted extramarital affairs, along with financial provisions for any children who might come forward with legitimate claims of paternity. As his friend and director Frank Capra later remarked, Gary lived his life playing heroes on screen. His will revealed he had finally found the courage to be one in real life. These 17 wills reveal something profound about fame, legacy, and the human desire to control how we're remembered, whether through bizarre bequests like Humphrey Bogart's chess puzzle, touching gestures like Carol Lombard's monthly poems, or shocking revelations like Clark Gable's secret child. These final documents offer glimpses into the true personalities behind the silver screen personas. As we've seen, sometimes the most telling act in a celebrity's life is what they choose to leave behind. These weren't just legal documents, they were final performances, last chances to shape legacies that continue to fascinate us decades later. What would you put in your will if you were famous? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey through Hollywood's most revealing final wishes, please hit like, subscribe, and the notification bell to catch our next exploration of Golden Age Hollywood's hidden stories. Until next time, remember, in Hollywood, the final scene is often the most revealing.